Robert, I don't think you need to introduce yourself. Everybody knows who you are. But go ahead and tell us a brief summary of the talk. It's a brief talk. You can probably cover the whole thing in a summary.
I basically needed fake data in the sense that it's stuff like forenames, addresses, bank account numbers, all that stuff. And I started creating that by hand and got annoyed really quickly. And then thought that the JavaScript people most likely have something. And I found a wonderful library, and I wrote probably the worst TypeScript to detranspiler in the world. It's basically just a bit of string pruning and some stuff. And now we have a gigantic library that is always up to date with what the JavaScript people have. And if you ever need like an Arabic forename with a Russian street number or street name, fakerd is the project to pull in. And that's it. A very brief summary.
I haven't counted yet, but it just occurred to me earlier, just before I started the live stream tonight, that you have spoken possibly at more DConf editions than anyone aside from Walter and maybe Andre I would expect. You haven't presented at all of them, have you?
That is true. I presented at the first one.
Uh-huh.
Then I think I skipped a year or two, maybe even two. And then I presented in Berlin the first time. Yeah, I think at Berlin the second time. And then I have to remember that was 2016, 17 or something. And then, a few more times. While working on my PhD, I was using D, so there was always something to talk about. And there was always a library I needed, so I pretty much always had something to talk about. And then using D for symmetry, there's always a library I needed, so there's always something to talk about. And you guys have me, so that is a big plus. And I sort of briefly remember, like the first time I was on stage, I was very young and very green. And it took me, like afterwards, quite a long time to watch my talk, sort of to learn from my mistakes. Because if the first time you see yourself on camera, you think, what an idiot. Like his posture is all terrible, his speech patterns are just annoying. And ever since then, that helped me improve, right? And talking publicly, or at least to sort of a group of people, is a skill you need, at least in our field, I think. So this is perfect training. I mean, if there's ever a crowd that can destroy you professionally on stage, it's the D community when you talk about the D programming language. So yeah, I mean, it's proof by fire, right? So like it really forces you as well to get your thoughts about your work in order to have some sort of comprehensive talk.
Yeah, public speaking, man, that's a skill. When I was fresh out of high school, I was a mess in front of a crowd, man. I couldn't even speak in front of my classroom, man. But I got over that. But 30 years of teaching English in various facilities, from auditoriums to small groups to mid-sized groups, it just you lose it eventually. But I don't think you ever 100% lose the nervousness. I still get a little nervous when I get on a stage.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like if you lose that, then probably you should move on. Then you're probably just jaded. Yeah. But what I have found is like while being at university, I also had to supervise bachelor and master students, and they had to give 2 presentations to get their degree basically as well. And basically what I told them every time was, if they're new to the department, if it's late at night, open up your laptop, turn the camera on, give a test presentation, watch it and delete the file, because you're going to hate yourself and you don't want anybody to see it. And it was really interesting. The first presentation they usually did were, quite crap, but you could really see who did it, like who actually recorded themselves and watched themselves. And actually, one or two actually came up to me afterwards and saying, yeah, that really helped. And I hate myself now, but the presentation was better, I hope. So,
Walter says he's nervous until he starts talking. Then he's too engaged to be nervous. Yeah, that's the way it works. Yeah, definitely. And, the other part of that is coming up with the topics. And I think it was Ali who told me in one of our DConf Online chats that coming up with a conference talk is just a matter of looking at the project you're working on.
Yeah, pretty much. I think one of the problems there is I often feel it's all trivial, but it's trivial to you because you've worked on it for weeks and months, right?
Mm.
In the beginning, you'd had no idea what it actually was that you were trying to do. And after you spend that time, if it's the project you're working on, it just becomes obvious what the things are that have to happen. And you can't understand why somebody else doesn't know that and would find that interesting. And you just have to remind yourself that, yeah, they didn't spend those weeks or months on it. So for them, it's all new.
The other element of that is that, another element of that is people who aren't used to presenting. I think there's a lot of people have some concern about being wrong.
Yeah.
And I think that's the wrong way to look at it. I think the way to look at it is, if you're presenting as an expert, that's one thing. But if you're presenting something as an experiment or something that's new to you or whatever, you want to be wrong, because that's the venue where people are going to tell you the right way if you haven't learned it already. I mean, you don't want to be completely wrong, but it's okay to make mistakes.
Sure. Yeah, and also quite often there are sort of small bits and bobs that are wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But usually when you get to the stage where you think this is a talk, you at least got the idea correct or close enough that it's worthwhile presenting. And like even for this talk here, like while working on it, I thought, well, maybe I should rerun the transpiler. I'd done it like a few weeks before, and they did some commits in the fakerd.js project, and it actually didn't compile. Like it didn't really work anymore. There were a few files that changed, and like I changed them back, and the transpiler wasn't really much worse. It was actually a tiny bit nicer, and it worked again. So it's also sort of a way of checking yourself, I find. And at the beginning, like my first talk, the first few minutes, I was really nervous because that was the crowd that could destroy me on stage, which was recorded for YouTube, right? For all posterity to see how the small guy fails. But what I found, the D community is very opinionated and strong in saying what they think is right, but they will help you. They will help you all the way.
100%.
And they will tell you that the approach you take is crap, and they will present you a better one. And quite often they will create a pull request for you, making it better even. So the things I have learned over the years from the community, and I think also in part due to given presentation and showing that I'm invested in it, invaluable. Like there's no, like without any second doubt in my mind, without the D community, I wouldn't be here today, and I wouldn't have the job and the opportunity I had over those last, coming up to 10 years now. So like get engaged early.
Yeah, Adam says in the live stream that he just makes things up live. Yeah, goes off the cuff, I guess. Planning equals worry. Improvisation equals stress-free. Yeah, I'm like that in my classes. I know the material inside out, back and forth, and so whatever I'm teaching, usually I can just wing it. I don't have to do any prep beforehand anymore. But I can't quite get there if I'm going to give a presentation on stage on something that I haven't got that level of depth with.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, there is something to be said for winging it if you've got the skills and the knowledge in your head.
I guess you would have to have a slight idea where you want to get to, like a direction plus minus 30 degrees or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can probably just, like, if you have worked on it long enough, you can probably just start talking.
Yeah, the reason we're talking so much about speaking is because there's not a whole lot to talk about your talk. But I do have a question for you to start us on that path.
Always.
How long did it take you to put that library together, fakerd? It looked like there was a bit of trial and error in the process. Yeah,
so I basically started this library while working for Symmetry.
Mm-hmm.
And this was sort of part of my Fridays project, which is an HR project. I would say like 1.5 Fridays, pretty much. Like the initial one, like if you look at it, a big part of the 1,200 lines or so is basically some handwritten DC code. The transpiling of the JavaScript or TypeScript sources is trivial.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is probably one of the worst examples here, where they use single ticks and you have to find the right places to turn those into double ticks, which is like the most complicated thing of it all. And then the rest is basically some folder scraping and file name concatenation. It's surprisingly easy. And I was somewhat surprised that nobody has done it before, because the library is so awesome. and it gives you so much data. It was sort of a no-brainer after I started it.
Well, I had never heard of this, and that's the case with a lot of the talks that you give, actually, because you're using like the one you gave last year at DConf Online about the I can't even remember the name of it now, the Facebook library with the where you had the Star Wars stuff.
GraphQL.
GraphQL, there we go. Yeah, I had vaguely heard of that, but I had absolutely never heard of fakerd.js before because it's just not in my my experience. I haven't looked it up yet, but I was going to ask who maintains it. Where's it from? What's the?
So it is originally, it's a JavaScript library originally, and now sort of they're in the process of converting it to TypeScript. There was somewhat of a headline news about this, I think a year back or maybe even this year, where the maintainer got a bit upset that he wasn't really getting the funding he thought he needed to continue this library. And he basically broke big parts of the JavaScript ecosystem by deleting the library on NPM and on GitHub.
Oh, that was this project. Okay. Yeah, I heard about that.
But obviously there were like, I don't know, 10,000 forks of it on GitHub at that point. And now I think there's a group of people maintaining it. So people with different language backgrounds contribute basically JSON files to it with like common forenames for whatever the languages that they were using. So it's one of those NPM libraries, one of those 1.2 million libraries that they have now.
And this one's more than a single function, at least.
Yeah. But in itself, like that library is like, the idea is brilliant. The actual engineering of it is good and boring. There isn't that much going on, right? It's string concatenation in the end.
In the live stream chat, Walter says maybe generate test data with ChatGPT, and Mike Shaw says he's going to test that out in the break. What's your take on that?
Technically, absolutely possible, like 100%. But at least for my purposes, and I would assume for most purposes of most people, like just pulling in this library and calling the correct function that you need is probably quicker and simpler. So yes, eventually in 10 years time, nobody will write this library anymore. But right now it's there. Just because now we have Torx screwdrivers does not mean that we throw the Phillips head screws that we have away, right? At least usually not. So I think it's just going to be another tool eventually. I think whatever your editor of choice is, it will help you with ChatGPT or whatever API is happening at that point, help you do the coding.
Hopefully without violating licenses.
Yeah, that's also like another thing, right? But yeah.
Well, one of the slides in your talk was titled "Classes are awesome."
Yeah.
I watched your talk several days ago, but it seems like you challenged people to dispute you on that.
Well, they can try disputing me, but I think they are wrong because classes are awesome. Like this application here is like somebody had an application and then invented a tool to solve it, and he came up with classes, or they came up with classes, and it's the perfect application for them. I don't see a reason not to use them here, but I see many reasons to use them there.
Well, for this program, for the simple program like this, there's absolutely no reason not to use them. But I'm just looking at that blanket statement, classes are awesome. There are limits, yeah?
Absolutely, but there are limits to structs as well. There are limits to how you can sanely use templates as well and string mixins. It's always a choice, right? We have so many tools at this point that deciding which trade-off you take is the name of the game. It's not that this tool is going to solve all your problems perfectly. It's like this tool is going to help you to maybe solve one problem nicer than the other ones, right? I could have written this in assembly, but why would I?
That's true. Well, I wonder what's your criteria for choosing classes over structs? I had a discussion with Matthias, I think, about this a couple of years ago. We were discussing, and I always prefer structs unless I absolutely need the hierarchy.
Yeah.
But
in this case,
he thinks of it in terms of modeling, though. He prefers to model with classes. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So in this case, basically, if for whatever language you choose to generate your fake data from, it does not implement that specific feature. So for instance, the German one doesn't have street names. It will fall back to the English one. And this fallback is basically function overriding, right? Or like if you have a specification in that language, you override that function. And if you don't, you get the base class function. So virtual functions in this case is the thing that was the perfect tool for the job.
Yeah, I like that you were forced to think about that in D upfront before diving in. Do we want value types? Can we use reference types? What do we need?
Yeah.
I love that aspect of it. Some people don't. On the last slide of your talk, you said grab everything and give nothing back.
Yeah.
Elaborate. That sounds pretty stingy, man.
Yeah, but in a good case, right? So like pretty much all the libraries on npm.js are free and open source.
Mm-hmm.
And they have many good ideas, fakerd.js being one of them. Like I find that like you sort of have to have a small spark and then the rest is just work. If you just browse those libraries, you can find your small spark and take their idea and do it in D and do it better and do it fast. And if you can even like reuse or basically write a transpiler like I did for what particular library you have, even better. I mean, they have 1.2 million libraries. Yes, some are just joke libraries and some just contain one function, but maybe one function is awesome enough to warrant being stolen. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, just copy it, maybe.
I think this discussion comes up in our community now and then, the whole, like NPM versus dub registry and cargo versus dub registry. And I'm not talking about dub as a tool. I'm just talking about the registry. How do you think we fare compared to NPM, let's say? And I obviously, in terms of numbers, we're nowhere near it. But in terms of usability, searchability, all that.
I would sort of prefix this by saying that Phobos is a much better standard library than what JavaScript or TypeScript have. So much of the need to put stuff in NPM, we just don't have because Phobos is so great. But then obviously just the UX on NPM is miles better than the dub registry. And that is probably just because, the D people don't really care about the dub registry enough, and there's not enough push to make it nicer. I bet like if we invest like, I don't know, a couple of man-month into the dub registry, it's going to be good enough. Like the search experience is good enough and all that stuff. And then also, I would say the JavaScript language community, and now with TypeScript, is a lot more fractured than the dub community. Just for one, because it's a lot bigger. And then you have like different subgroups for if you're using Angular for work, or if you're using React or Svelte, or insert awesome JavaScript framework to build your application here. And that entails like basically a breakdown into libraries. So in work, we pull in quite a few libraries that help with UI elements for Angular and Angular materials and more specific. So they are bigger just by virtue of catering to different subgroups. I think there's no great conflict or great innovation that they have. It's just JavaScript. It's like the second most used language. So they're going to have a lot of packages.
And we have a question from Ricky. What improvements in the ecosystem would you love to see to encourage more libraries?
First off, more stuff in Phobos, which will to a degree reduce the number of libraries. I think if we have more people, we will naturally get more libraries because more people will have different needs and people will just come up with a library, for whatever purpose they need. Like I said this before and I said it again, I think the fact is D is the best language and Phobos is the best standard library. We just need more people.
What other JavaScript or TypeScript libraries are on your radar right now for future porting to D?
So they have a sort of extension to Moustache templates called handlebar.js. And that has a lot nicer white space control than Moustache. And I sort of need that. That one I probably will not port in the sense that like porting the actual functions, but just taking the grammar of the templating engine and writing a parser and execution engine for that. It's not that big a deal. I just have to sort of find a week time to do that.
We have a question here in the live stream chat from Kurzibu. What D features were useful in writing the generator?
D features per se, array concatenations. Basically, all the Moustache templates contain, like, for instance, the street names is basically some surname of the language plus street or avenue or whatever is used in that language. And I turn those into two function calls that basically concatenate the return strings. That is, I would say, the D feature. Like if we count phobos as a D feature, I would say std string and std algorithm searching. Those are the two most used things in that library.
Well, you mentioned the array concatenation, and that's exactly what Brian was pumping up in his workshop video, one of his workshop videos.
Like it's, like compared to C, for instance, it's so simple to just concatenate to arrays and don't think about it and just move on. Obviously, other languages have that now as well. As soon as you have it going anywhere else where that doesn't exist, it's just a no starter for me, at least.
Hi again. Name something that you really need that you cannot do in D and you can easily do in other languages.
Find more people.
That's true. Yeah. Java, C++, yeah, even Lua probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can find more people.
As I said, the language is perfect. The standard library is on its way to be perfect. More people. That's the thing I need.
But Robert, go ahead and give us some closing thoughts.
D is the best language, and I think that should be its motto.
All right. Thanks, Robert, for your talk.